courtroom was cold. Not the kind of cold you feel when a window is left open in winter, but the deeper kind, the kind that settles inside your chest and refuses to leave. The fluorescent lights above courtroom 4B of the Hargrove County Civil Court hummed with a pale, indifferent brightness, illuminating rows of dark wooden benches, stiff-backed chairs, and the expressionless faces of strangers who had gathered to witness the legal dissolution of a 12-year marriage. Eleanor Hale sat on the left side of the room. She sat very still. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap, one layered carefully over the other, as though she were holding something fragile between them, something that might shatter if she moved too quickly. She wore a soft cream blouse beneath a pale gray blazer, the only blazer she still owned that could close across her body. Her belly was round and full, unmistakable at 7.5 months, pressing gently against the edge of the table where she sat beside her attorney. She did not look broken, but anyone who had known Eleanor Hale, even briefly, anyone who had once seen the light in her dark brown eyes, the way she tilted her head back when she laughed at something genuinely funny, the way she remembered the names of every waiter and every doorman and every parking attendant she ever encountered, anyone who had known that woman would have recognized with quiet devastation that the woman sitting in that courtroom was not entirely the same person. Across the room, on the right side, sat Marcus Hale. Marcus was 41 years old and looked it in the best possible way, the kind of 41 that expensive suits and daily gym memberships and the particular confidence of a man who has never once doubted his own importance produce in a person. His jaw was sharp. His hair was precisely trimmed. His attorney, David Park, a man known across 3 counties for his aggressive courtroom tactics, sat at his side like a polished weapon. The proceedings had been underway for 40 minutes when Marcus Hale looked across the room at his pregnant wife, at the mother of the child still growing inside her, and he smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a man who believed he had already won. And then he leaned toward his attorney's ear, whispered something, and David Park stood up, straightened his tie, and said the words that stopped Eleanor's breath cold in her throat. "Your Honor, my client would like the court to note that he has serious reservations regarding the paternity of the child in question. He is requesting a DNA test be ordered before any custody arrangement is considered." The silence that followed was the loudest sound Eleanor had ever heard. She felt the baby move inside her, a small, slow roll, as though the child, too, had felt the weight of those words and shifted uncomfortably beneath them. Eleanor's attorney, a quiet, methodical woman named Dr. Sandra Osei, placed one steady hand on Eleanor's forearm. "Breathe," she whispered. Eleanor breathed, but Marcus Hale was still smiling. And here is what you need to understand, what makes everything that follows not simply a story about betrayal, but something far more extraordinary. Marcus Hale had no idea what was waiting for him in that courtroom. He had spent 6 months building his case. He had hired the best attorney. He had arranged every piece on the board with careful, calculated precision. But there was one document, sealed inside a manila envelope, held in the hands of Judge Patricia Wren, that Marcus had never seen. A document that would, within the hour, change everything he thought he owned. To understand what happened in that courtroom, you have to go back. Not to the beginning of the marriage, though the beginning is where the first faintest cracks appeared. You have to go back further than that. You have to go back to a Tuesday evening in October, 11 years ago, in the lobby of a mid-size marketing firm in the city of Hargrove, where a 26-year-old woman named Eleanor Whitmore was waiting for an elevator that refused to arrive. She was carrying too many things. This was a constant feature of Eleanor's life in those years. She was always carrying too many things. a laptop bag over one shoulder, a canvas tote full of research folders over the other, a coffee that had gone cold 2 hours ago but that she was still holding out of stubbornness, a phone pressed between her ear and her shoulder, and in her free hand, somehow, a presentation board she was trying to keep vertical. The elevator dinged, the doors slid open, and a man stepped out just as Eleanor stepped in, and the corner of her presentation board caught him squarely in the chest. The cold coffee went everywhere. For a moment, both of them simply stood there in the lobby, she staring at the coffee dripping from his very expensive-looking shirt, he staring at her. And then Eleanor Whitmore did something that Marcus Hale would tell the story of for years afterward, at dinner parties and family gatherings. She looked at him with those dark, serious eyes and said, without a hint of apology and with complete, unironic sincerity, "I'm so sorry about your shirt. That one was my fault. But also, you should watch where you're going." Marcus blinked, and then he laughed. It was, he would later tell people, the first time he had laughed like that in months. They had coffee together, new coffee, properly warm, at the cafe across the street. Then they had dinner. Then they had a second dinner 3 days later. And within 6 months, Marcus Hale, who had a reputation in Hargrove business circles for being charming but emotionally unreachable, was introducing Eleanor Whitmore to his mother with the particular nervousness of a man who understands he is in territory he has never navigated before. Eleanor was the kind of person people found magnetic without being able to explain exactly why. She was not flashy. She did not perform warmth the way some people do, loudly and for an audience. She was simply present, fully, quietly, attentively present in whatever room she occupied. She remembered things. She asked real questions and listened to the answers. When Marcus sat across from her at dinner and told her about his father's company, the construction and real estate development firm that bore the Hale name, the one Marcus had spent his 20s clawing his way into and then upward through, she didn't nod politely. She asked specific, intelligent questions. She challenged his assumptions about the market with a directness that startled him. She was brilliant, and she was kind. Those two things rarely lived so comfortably together in one person, and Marcus Hale knew it. He held on to her accordingly. They married in June, 2 years after the coffee in the lobby incident. The wedding was at the Whitmore family estate, a sprawling property an hour outside of Hargrove that Eleanor's father, Thomas Whitmore, had spent 40 years building into something remarkable. Thomas Whitmore was a self-made man in the most complete sense of the phrase, a man who had started with nothing and through decades of careful, principled work had built a portfolio of real estate holdings, a private investment firm, and a personal reputation in Hargrove County that commanded genuine, unperformed respect. He was a quiet man, not cold, quiet. He watched more than he spoke. And on the day of Eleanor's wedding, as he walked her daughter down the aisle of the garden they had planted together when she was 8 years old, he kept his eyes forward. He did not work at Marcus with the particular warmth of a father welcoming a son. He looked at his daughter, and those who were paying attention would later say that Thomas Whitmore held Eleanor's hand just a half-second longer than necessary at the altar before he stepped back. Just a half-second, the kind of hesitation that could mean anything, or could mean only one thing. In the early years, the marriage was genuinely good. Not the performed for social media kind of good, but the quiet, domestic, genuinely contented kind. Eleanor had left her marketing position to help Marcus manage the branding and public relations side of Hale Construction, a decision that at the time felt natural and collaborative. She had the skills, he had the need. Together, they made the company look like something worth trusting, and the company grew. Over the next 5 years, Hale Construction went from a regional firm with a solid but unremarkable portfolio to one of the most recognized development companies in the state. They secured government contracts, they broke ground on projects that appeared in architectural publications. Marcus Hale's name began appearing in business magazines, in the kind of short profile pieces that are the stepping stone to longer, more important profile pieces. Behind all of it, behind every pitch deck, every media statement, every carefully worded press release, every crisis communication plan when a contractor went over budget and a local council member called for an investigation, was Eleanor. She worked without credit because that was simply how things were structured. Her name did not appear on the company letterhead. Her title, informally, was something between consultant and strategist, and the kind of person who keeps everything from unraveling, while the person whose name is on the door takes the meetings and shakes the hands. She did not resent this, or if she did not say so, not for a long time. What she did do, quietly and without fanfare, was continue to learn. She took online courses in corporate law. She studied contract structures. She developed over years a legal and financial literacy that went far beyond what her work at Hale Construction required, because Eleanor Whitmore Hale was not simply a woman who helped her husband succeed. She was a woman who was, quietly and methodically, building a complete understanding of how power worked and where it actually resided. This would matter later. The red flags, when Eleanor looked back on them honestly, had not arrived like red flags at all. They arrived like small shadows, barely visible, the kind of thing you notice out of the corner of your eye and explain away before you've fully formed the thought. The first one she remembered clearly came in their 4th year of marriage. Marcus had attended a charity gala, a real estate industry event, and had come home later than expected, with the particular careful composure of a man who is very aware of how he is presenting himself. She hadn't questioned it. He traveled frequently. Late nights were not unusual. But a week later, she had found a receipt, not for anything explicit, not for anything that could be held up as evidence, just a restaurant receipt from a night he had told her he was in a meeting at the office. The kind of restaurant you don't go to alone, and that you wouldn't expense because the company cards were tracked. She'd put it in a drawer. She'd told herself it was nothing. But the drawer, over the following years, accumulated a quiet archive of nothing. A strange perfume on a shirt that wasn't hers. A phone that started being taken into the bathroom. Business trips that extended for reasons that were always plausible and always slightly vague. A growing coolness in the way Marcus looked at her that she tried, for years, to chalk up to the natural evolution of a long partnership, rather than the unmistakable temperature drop of a heart that was directing its warmth elsewhere. She had asked him once, gently, without accusation, in the way that women who love their husbands ask when they are genuinely hoping to be told they are wrong. "Are we okay?" Marcus had looked at her with what she now understood was practiced warmth, had reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and had said, "Of course we are. You worry too much." She had believed him, because she wanted to, generationally. When Eleanor became pregnant, it had not been planned, not in the clinical, scheduled way of a couple who has agreed on timing and prepared a nursery 6 months in advance. It had arrived the way the most significant things in life often do, unexpected, slightly terrifying, and wrapped inside a feeling that was, at its core, a kind of joy she hadn't been prepared for. She had told Marcus on a Sunday morning in September, sitting at the kitchen island with the test in her hand, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. He had looked at the test for a long moment. Then he had smiled, and it had been a good smile, a real one, or at least something that looked real, and said, "Okay, that's okay." He had hugged her, but his arms had held her in that particular way of arms that are responding to a prompt rather than following an impulse. She had felt it. She had chosen, again, not to see it. 4 months into the pregnancy, Eleanor's father, Thomas Whitmore, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis was late stage. The prognosis was not good. And in the weeks that followed, Eleanor divided herself between her pregnancy and her father's decline with a quiet, devastating efficiency that anyone watching would have found both admirable and heartbreaking. She drove to her childhood home every other day. She sat with her father in the sunlit room off the back garden, the room they had always called the library, because of the floor-to-ceiling shelves her father had built himself before Eleanor was born, one plank at a time. Thomas Whitmore, even diminished by illness, was still fully himself in the ways that mattered. He was still precise, still thoughtful, still watching more than he spoke. One afternoon, 3 months before he died, he had looked at his daughter, at the gentle swell of her pregnancy beneath her sweater, at the particular kind of exhaustion she carried that was distinct from ordinary tiredness, and he had said something she didn't fully understand at the time. "Eleanor," he had said, in the deliberate way he said everything, "a person's true character is never more visible than in the moment they believe they no longer need you." She had held his hand. "I know, Papa." "Do you?" he had asked. She hadn't answered. He had squeezed her hand once, then looked out the window at the garden. "Everything I've built," he had said quietly, "I built for you, not for anyone else. For you." She had thought he was simply being sentimental, the kind of sentimentality that terminal illness draws out of people who were never sentimental before. She had not yet known about the will. Thomas Whitmore passed away on a Thursday morning in February, 11 days after Eleanor's 37th birthday. He died in the library, in the chair by the window, with Eleanor holding one hand and his longtime attorney, a man named Gerald Finch, seated quietly in the corner, having been called in 2 days prior to witness the final signing of documents Thomas had been preparing for months. Eleanor had not been told the contents of the will. Her father had told her only that everything was in order and that she would understand when the time came. Marcus did not attend the funeral. He sent a flower arrangement with a card that said, "With deepest sympathy." He told Eleanor when she called from the funeral home that he was in the middle of a contract closing that could not be postponed, that the timing was terrible, that he was sorry. Eleanor had stood in the parking lot of Hargrove Funeral Home in the February cold, 7 months pregnant, holding her phone against her ear and listening to her husband explain why he could not come to her father's funeral, and she had felt something shift inside her. Not dramatically, not like a breaking, more like a long, slow click, the sound of something that had been misaligned for years, finally settling into its actual position so that she could see it clearly for the first time. She had said, "Okay, Marcus," and she had walked back inside. 2 weeks after the funeral, Marcus Hale called Eleanor into his home office. This in itself was strange. He called her in, the way you call an employee in. Not, "Can you come talk to me for a minute," with the warmth of a partner, but a short text on a Sunday afternoon that said simply, "Come to my office when you have a minute." She went. He was standing behind his desk rather than sitting, a detail she noticed immediately, the way you notice when someone has positioned themselves for a conversation they've rehearsed. He was wearing the navy sweater she had given him for Christmas 3 years ago. She would remember that detail for a very long time. There was an envelope on the desk. "Sit down," he said. "I'm fine standing," she replied. Something moved across his face, a flicker of irritation at not having the scene arranged the way he had planned it. Then it was gone. "I've been thinking, for a long time actually, about us, about where we are, and I think it's better for both of us if we don't," Eleanor said quietly. He stopped. She looked at him with those dark, steady eyes, the same eyes that had once charmed him with their directness, that were now looking at him with an exhausted, unflinching clarity. "Whatever you're about to read from a script, don't. Just say it." A longer pause this time. "I want a divorce, Eleanor." The room was very quiet. The February wind pressed softly against the window behind him. Inside Eleanor's body, the baby was still, a deep, listening stillness. "How long?" she asked. He didn't ask what she meant. He knew. "That doesn't matter right now." "How long, Marcus?" He looked at the desk. 3 years. 3 years. The number landed in the room and sat there. 3 years of business trips and late nights, and quiet drawers full of small, disregarded evidence. 3 years during which she had built his company's reputation, managed his public image, written the press materials that had turned him into a respected name in this industry. 3 years during which she had lost pieces of herself in the gradual, almost imperceptible way that happens when you spend your energy maintaining a structure that is rotting from the inside. 3 years, and she was 7 months pregnant. "Her name?" Eleanor asked. "That's not her name, Marcus." A beat. "Vivian. She works in acquisitions. I don't need the rest," Eleanor said. She picked up her coat from the back of the chair by the door. "Eleanor, I'll need a few days," she said, her voice precise and even, as though she were discussing a project timeline. "My father just died. I am 7 months pregnant. I will contact my attorney when I am ready. Whatever you think you want from this process, whatever your attorney is telling you, I need you to understand something." She turned at the door and looked at him. "I have been patient for a very long time." She left. He did not follow her. What happened next was not a quiet, private dissolution. Marcus Hale did not wait for Eleanor to find her footing. His attorney filed the divorce petition within the week, a move that Eleanor's attorney, Dr. Sandra Osei, described as aggressive even by the standards of a contested divorce. The filing cited irreconcilable differences. It made a series of financial claims that Sandra found both legally dubious and strategically calculated, claims designed not to reflect reality, but to establish a position, to force Eleanor into a defensive posture, to shift the balance of the proceedings in Marcus's favor before they had even truly begun. There was also, buried in the supporting documentation, a claim regarding the prenuptial agreement the two of them had signed before their wedding. Marcus's legal team argued that the document contained provisions that significantly limited Eleanor's entitlement to the marital estate, and that those provisions had been clear and binding from the beginning. Eleanor had signed that prenuptial agreement at 27, in love and trusting, and with a lawyer she had been introduced to by Marcus's family. A lawyer she now understood, who had been working with a particular orientation. Sandra reviewed every page. "This is not as strong as they think it is," she told Eleanor on the phone. "There are provisions here that were never properly explained to you, and I can challenge the circumstances of signing. But Eleanor, they are going to push hard, and they are going to do it publicly. Marcus needs this to move fast before your father's estate is settled. That much is clear from the timing." Before your father's estate is settled. Eleanor had heard that sentence and filed it carefully in the part of her mind that was beginning to see the full shape of what Marcus had been doing, not just for the last few months, but possibly for much longer than that. The first public moment came not in a courtroom, but at a dinner. It was the annual Hargrove Business Council Gala, an event that Eleanor and Marcus had attended together for 8 consecutive years, the kind of event at which their presence together had been a fixture of the room. This year, Eleanor had decided to attend alone. She had told Sandra it was important to be present, to be visible, to refuse to disappear simply because her husband had decided she was inconvenient. She had worn a deep navy dress, carefully chosen to fit her pregnancy with dignity and grace. She had worn her grandmother's pearls. She arrived to find Marcus already there, with Vivian. Not quietly, not in the back of the room. Marcus Hale had brought his girlfriend to the Business Council Gala 4 weeks after filing for divorce from his pregnant wife, and had positioned himself in the center of the room, as though this was simply what was happening now, and anyone with a problem with it was behind the times. Eleanor had stood in the doorway of that ballroom for 3 full seconds. 3 seconds in which she absorbed the sight of the woman, younger, stylish, with the particular composure of someone who has been coached on how to behave in a public moment, standing beside Marcus with her hand in the crook of his arm. 3 seconds in which she registered the faces of people she had known for years as they noticed her in the doorway and looked away. Then Eleanor Whittemore Hale walked into the room. She greeted people by name. She accepted a glass of water and held it with steady hands. She made polite, composed conversation. When she came, inevitably, within speaking distance of Marcus, she nodded at him once, a precise, calibrated nod, and turned to the person to her left to continue a conversation about the upcoming county infrastructure project. Marcus said nothing to her that evening, but as she was leaving, she passed close enough to hear him say to someone nearby, not whispering, not exactly, but not private either, "She'll get what she's entitled to, not more." The people around him laughed softly, in the way that people laugh when a man with power signals that he's not concerned. Eleanor kept walking. But a woman named Helen Marsh, who had known Eleanor for 9 years and who served on the County Heritage Board alongside Thomas Whitmore before his death, Helen Marsh would become, in the weeks ahead, one of the more important figures in this story, for reasons that had nothing to do with gossip and everything to do with a single piece of information she carried. But that comes later. The preliminary hearing was set in mid-March. In the weeks before it, Marcus's legal team moved with a precision and urgency that confirmed what Sandra had already told Eleanor. They wanted this done quickly. They wanted it resolved before the baby was born, before the estate settlement was finalized, and, Eleanor began to suspect, before certain facts about Hale Construction's financial arrangements became part of the formal record. Because Eleanor had, in those weeks of waiting and watching and quietly preparing, done something that Marcus had not anticipated. She had started reading. She had pulled every document she had access to, and as the woman who had managed Hale Construction's communications for 7 years, she had access to more than Marcus remembered. She had reviewed the contracts she had drafted, the media statements she had written, the financial summaries she had proofread, and in the language of those documents, in the structure of the agreements, she had found something that her newly sharpened legal literacy allowed her to read in an entirely different light. Sandra had confirmed it in one late-night call that lasted 2 hours. "He's been restructuring," Eleanor had said, "moving assets. Some of it happened before we married, some after. Some of it I was involved in, but not in the way he's claiming I was. Sandra, I drafted those contracts. I know what they say." "I know," Sandra had said. "He's counting on me not being able to prove that." "He's counting on a lot of things," Sandra said. Then she said, "Eleanor, your father's estate attorney called me today." Eleanor had gone very still. "Gerald Finch?" "Yes. He says there's a document he needs to present. He's been waiting for the appropriate legal context to do so." "What kind of document?" "The kind," Sandra said carefully, "that changes the entire shape of these proceedings." There is a moment in the life of every person who has been betrayed, not just hurt, but genuinely betrayed by someone they chose, trusted, and reorganized their entire life to accommodate, where the grief stops feeling dramatic and starts feeling simply, completely, quietly enormous. That moment arrived for Eleanor on a Wednesday night in late February. She was sitting in her car in the parking lot of Hargrove General Hospital. She had come for her 32-week prenatal appointment, alone, as she had been for the last 4 appointments, because somewhere around the 24th week, Marcus had stopped coming and she had stopped asking. The appointment had gone fine. The baby was healthy. A girl, the technician had confirmed weeks ago, with a kind smile that Eleanor had received with more composure than she felt. A girl. She was sitting in the parking lot afterward because she wasn't sure, quite honestly, that she was safe to drive. Not because of anything physical, because of the weight. It was raining, a slow, steady February rain that blurred the lights of the hospital entrance into soft, smeared halos of yellow and white. The windshield collected sheets of water in shifting, transparent layers. Eleanor sat with her hands in her lap, not on the wheel, and she let herself be still in the way she hadn't been still in weeks. The baby moved, a slow, deliberate shift, an elbow perhaps, or a knee, pressing briefly against Eleanor's ribs in that intimate, secret way that communicates absolutely nothing and everything simultaneously. Eleanor put one hand on her belly. "I know," she said aloud to the quiet car. "I know." What she was thinking, what she allowed herself to fully think for the first time in the rain-muffled privacy of that parking lot, was this. She had spent 11 years building a life inside someone else's framework. She had brought her intelligence, her creativity, her genuine care, her professional skill, her social grace, her patience, and finally her own father's dying weeks. She had brought all of it into the architecture of Marcus Hale's ambitions and his comfort and his ascent. And in return, she had received the kind of love that is really a kind of borrowing, the love of someone who values you precisely as long as you are useful, and who renegotiates the terms the moment someone else arrives who seems, in whatever way, more useful. She was not angry in that parking lot. She would be angry later. The anger was there. She could feel it, deeper than the grief, harder edged and slower burning. But it had not yet arrived at the surface. What she felt in that parking lot, in the rain, alone, was a kind of sorrow so complete and so honest that it was, paradoxically, almost clarifying. Because the sorrow was not just for herself, it was for the 11 years, for the woman she had been at 26 in that elevator lobby, carrying too many things, certain in the uncomplicated way of someone who has not yet been fully tested that the future held partnership and reciprocity and the particular safety of being truly known by someone. That woman had not been naive. She had been hopeful. There is a difference. And Eleanor Whittemore Hale, sitting in her car in a hospital parking lot at 8 months pregnant, decided something in those minutes of stillness that she had not been able to decide before. She was done apologizing for being right. She was done making herself smaller so that Marcus's choices would look less like failures. She was done being the quiet, competent, unacknowledged foundation of someone else's edifice. She put her hands on the wheel. She took one long, steady breath, and she drove home. In the days that followed, there were other difficult moments. There was the phone call from Marcus's mother, a woman named Constance Hale, who had always treated Eleanor with the particular brand of civil coolness that keeps a daughter-in-law permanently at arm's length, in which Constance said things that were formally polite and practically devastating. There was the moment at the grocery store when Eleanor ran into a couple they had socialized with for years and watched the husband greet her warmly while his wife suddenly found something very important to examine in the produce section. There was the morning she sat in Sandra's office and listened to the full inventory of what Marcus's legal team was claiming she was entitled to, and felt for the first time the specific, bright-hot flash of anger she had been waiting for. He was offering her a settlement that would cover her living expenses for 18 months and a one-time payment that Sandra described with careful professional neutrality as insufficient given the duration of the marriage and the extent of your professional contributions to the marital enterprise. Insufficient. She had thought about that word for a long time. Then she had thought about what Sandra had told her about Gerald Finch, about the document, about the question she had asked twice, what kind of document, and the careful answer that had not yet been fully given. There was a pause. Music swells slightly, then quiets. She called Gerald Finch herself that evening. He answered on the second ring in the measured, deliberate tone of a man who has been a trusted attorney for 40 years and has learned never to waste words. "Eleanor," he said, "I've been expecting your call." "Gerald, my father said, at the end he said everything was in order. He said I would understand when the time came." "That's correct. Is the time now?" A pause. Thoughtful. Not reluctant, thoughtful. "Your father built something, Eleanor. He built it carefully over many years, and he structured it with a very specific purpose. The will contains a conditional clause, and that clause has conditions that are about to be met." "Tell me," she said quietly. Gerald told her, and Eleanor Whittemore Hale sat in the chair of her kitchen, the chair by the window that looked out on the garden she had planted herself 5 years ago, with bulbs she'd ordered from a catalog and her father's planting guide, and she listened. And as Gerald spoke in his careful, precise, 40 years of practice voice, she felt the particular sensation of understanding arriving, not like a wave, not dramatically, but the way dawn arrives, gradually, completely, and without the possibility of being undone. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, He knew this was coming." "Your father was a careful man," Gerald said simply. She closed her eyes. "He protected me." "He did," Gerald said. "He very much did." But what Marcus Hale didn't know, what not a single person in his carefully arranged legal strategy had thought to look for, was that Thomas Whitmore had spent the last year of his life building a wall around his daughter so complete, so legally precise, and so perfectly timed that Marcus had been walking toward it for months without seeing it. And the morning of the divorce hearing, it was already there, waiting. Thomas Whitmore had always been 3 moves ahead. It was a quality that people who knew him in business described consistently, not with the breathless admiration reserved for dramatic risk-takers, but with the quieter, deeper respect given to people who are simply always right. Thomas did not gamble. He studied, he structured, and he moved with the particular patience of a man who understood that precision is more powerful than speed. In the final year of his life, even as the cancer reduced him physically, his mind had remained entirely itself. He had used the months between his diagnosis and his death to do 2 things with the Whitmore estate: to organize it and to protect it. He had always intended to leave everything to Eleanor. This was never in question. She was his only child, and the estate, built entirely before Eleanor was born, entirely through Thomas's own labor and judgment, carrying no connection to Marcus Hale, belonged to Eleanor in every meaningful sense. But Thomas had spent those final months doing something more specific than simply writing Eleanor's name into a will. He had spoken with Gerald Finch at length, multiple meetings, multiple drafts, a document that went through 7 revisions before Thomas was satisfied. Because what Thomas Whitmore had built was not simply a transfer of assets, it was a conditional architecture, a legal structure that would respond to circumstances like a mechanism designed to activate at a precise moment. The central provision was this: Eleanor was to inherit the full Whitmore estate, the family property, the investment portfolio, the real estate holdings, and a private trust that Thomas had established 10 years earlier and that had been growing quietly and substantially in the years since, under the condition that she was legally free of any partnership, financial or marital, that would allow a third party to claim entitlement to any portion of the estate. In plain language, Eleanor inherited everything, but the inheritance was structured so that it could only be formally transferred after the divorce was finalized and all marital asset claims had been resolved. And this was the piece that Gerald had explained with particular care. The transfer was structured through a legal framework that Thomas had spent considerable time designing specifically to be divorce-proof. The Whitmore Trust, which held the majority of the estate's value, had been established as a separate property instrument under Eleanor's name alone, with documentation predating the marriage by 6 years. This meant it was categorically outside the scope of any marital property claim under state law. The conditional clause went further. It stipulated that if, at the time of Eleanor's divorce proceedings, her spouse was found to have engaged in certain specifically defined conduct that Thomas had described in the document with legal precision that Gerald said had required consultation with 3 separate specialists, then an additional provision would activate. That provision involved the Whitmore family's controlling interest in a company that Marcus Hale had been trying to acquire for 2 years, a company called Whitmore Development Holdings, a company that Eleanor's father had never, in any of Marcus's research or due diligence or deal conversations, was connected to the Whitmore family name, because it was held in a blind trust under a different administrative name, and because Marcus Hale, for all his intelligence and ambition, had made a fundamental error that careful, patient people sometimes catch in brilliant, impatient ones. He had underestimated the quiet. He had spent years watching Thomas Whitmore sit in the corner of a room and listen, and he had categorized this as passivity rather than strategy. He had seen the man's absence from board meetings and networking events and taken it for disengagement rather than deliberate distance. He had been very, very wrong. Sandra Osei had reviewed the will documents for 2 full days before calling Eleanor back. "Eleanor," Sandra said, "your father was meticulous. I know. The trust is airtight. No marital property claim touches it. The documentation is clean, the dates are clear, the structure is legally sound. Marcus gets nothing from the Whitmore estate." "What about the other provision?" Sandra was quiet for a moment. "The one regarding Whitmore Development Holdings?" "Yes. I've been reviewing the acquisition documents that Marcus's company filed 18 months ago. Eleanor, he's been trying to acquire this company without knowing it belongs to your family. He's been negotiating with a holding entity that traces back through 2 layers of administrative structure to your father's trust." "I know. He doesn't know. I know he doesn't know." Another pause. "Sandra," Eleanor said, "when are we in court?" "March 15th. Is Gerald prepared to present the will documents at the hearing?" "He is. The judge has been notified that the estate documents are relevant to the asset proceedings and will need to be entered into the record." Eleanor was quiet. "There's one more thing," Sandra said. "Tell me." "I spoke with Helen Marsh. She told me that she had a conversation with your father about 6 months before he died. He told her something about Marcus, about a specific set of financial transactions related to the Hale construction contracts. She was willing to come forward with a statement." "What kind of transactions?" Sandra chose her words carefully. "The kind that explain why Marcus needs this divorce finalized quickly, before certain things become part of a public record." Eleanor was quiet. She thought about Marcus in his office, behind his desk, in the navy sweater, with the envelope on the table, and the look of a man who believed he was ending a game he had already won. She thought about her father in the library, by the window, holding her hand a half-second too long. "He knew," she said quietly for the second time. "He prepared," Sandra said. "Let's go to court," Eleanor said. March 15th arrived with the particular clarity of a late winter day that has decided, unexpectedly, to be cold and bright and utterly without ambiguity. Eleanor was ready before 7 in the morning. She had chosen her clothes the night before with the same care she brought to everything important, not to perform power, not to signal wealth, but to inhabit herself completely. She wore a deep charcoal dress that fell to the knee, the only formal dress she owned that fit her pregnancy without compromise. Over it, a structured ivory coat. Her grandmother's pearls again, her hair pulled back simply, no excessive jewelry, no forced statement. She looked like a woman who had already made her peace and was here only to formalize what she already understood. Sandra met her outside the courthouse at 8:30. Gerald Finch was already inside, a manila envelope in his briefcase, and the composed expression of a man who has been waiting for this particular morning for months. They walked in together. Footsteps on marble floors. Echo. Silence. Courtroom 4B was fuller than Eleanor had expected. Divorce proceedings, while public record, don't typically draw audiences, but word had circulated in the way that word circulates in a small city's business community that the Hale divorce hearing was going to be consequential. Several people who had professional relationships with Hale Construction were present. 2 people Eleanor recognized from the business council were seated in the gallery. Helen Marsh sat near the back, straight-backed and still. Marcus was already at the plaintiff's table when Eleanor entered. He was impeccably dressed. David Park sat beside him, his legal folders arranged with the precise symmetry of a man who is very confident in his materials. Marcus looked up when Eleanor entered, and his expression was the expression she had seen at the gala, that measured, contained satisfaction of a man who believes he controls the room. He glanced at her belly briefly, then looked away. Pause. Heartbeat sound under narration, barely audible. Judge Patricia Wren entered at 9 o'clock exactly. Judge Wren was in her late 50s, with the kind of face that reveals nothing professionally and misses nothing personally. She had presided over Hargrove County civil matters for 14 years. She was not known for theatrics. She was known for thoroughness. The first 40 minutes of the hearing proceeded as David Park had presumably designed them to proceed. His framing was efficient and aggressive, a marriage of reasonable duration, a prenuptial agreement that clearly defined the scope of shared assets, a business enterprise that had been built substantially before the marriage and should be treated as Marcus's separate property, and a settlement offer that was, Park claimed with practiced sincerity, more than generous given the circumstances. There was a moment, about 30 minutes in, when David Park made a comment about the contributions Eleanor had made to Hale Construction being informal, uncredentialed, and difficult to quantify. Eleanor didn't move. Sandra made a note on her legal pad with a precise, unhurried pen stroke. Then came the moment, the one Marcus had been waiting for, the one he had positioned as his strategic centerpiece. David Park rose and delivered, in smooth legal language, the request that had already been entered into the pre-hearing filings, the paternity challenge, the DNA test. The language was carefully crafted to be legally defensible while being publicly and personally devastating, structured to cast doubt, to undermine, to force Eleanor into a defensive position on the most intimate ground possible. In the gallery, someone shifted uncomfortably. Judge Wren looked at Eleanor's table. "Counselor Osei, your response?" Sandra stood. "Your Honor, the paternity request is a procedural delay tactic, and we will address it in its proper sequence. However, at this time, the defense respectfully requests that the court receive and review a document that is directly material to the asset proceedings before us today. What document? The last will and testament of Mr. Thomas Whitmore, deceased, along with the trust documentation and conditional provisions contained therein. The estate's attorney, Mr. Gerald Finch, is present and prepared to present the document to the court. David Park's hand stopped moving on his legal pad. Marcus Hale's expression changed. Not dramatically, just a fraction, a small, precise tightening around the eyes, a micro-adjustment of the jaw. The expression of a man who has just detected something he did not expect in a room he believed he had surveyed completely. "Mr. Finch," Judge Wren said, "please approach." Gerald Finch stood. He was a tall, unhurried man with gray at his temples and the manner of someone who has always understood that the most important moments in a room are the quiet ones. He walked to the bench and presented the manila envelope. The courtroom was very still. Judge Wren read. She read for a long time. Her expression revealed nothing in the way that practiced legal minds reveal nothing. But twice, once when she reached what appeared to be the third page, and once at what appeared to be the end, she stopped. Both times, she looked up briefly in the direction of Marcus Hale's table. Then she looked back down and continued reading. Pause. The silence in this section should be felt by the listener. When she finished, she set the document on her desk and folded her hands on top of it. "Mr. Park," she said, "I'd like to ask your client a question." "Of course, Your Honor." "Mr. Hale," Judge Wren said, "are you familiar with a company called Whitmore Development Holdings?" The room was still. Marcus said, "Yes." "Can you describe your familiarity with that company?" "My company has been pursuing an acquisition of Whitmore Development Holdings for approximately 18 months. It is a mid-sized development company with a regional real estate portfolio that is strategic for our expansion plans." "I see. And during those 18 months of acquisition negotiations, were you made aware at any point of the ownership structure of Whitmore Development Holdings?" "We dealt with the administrative holding entity, Crestline Asset Management." "And were you aware," the judge said in the same measured tone, "that Crestline Asset Management is a subsidiary trust administrator for the Whitmore Family Trust, the estate of Mr. Thomas Whitmore, and that as of Mr. Whitmore's death and the formal execution of his will, the controlling interest in Whitmore Development Holdings transferred entirely to your wife, Eleanor Hale?" The silence in courtroom 4B had a physical quality. It was the silence of a room full of people who have collectively stopped breathing. David Park sat completely still. Marcus Hale's face, that composed, expensive face that had carried its controlled satisfaction into this room like a shield, underwent a change that the people present would describe later in several different ways. Someone in the gallery said his jaw went slack. Someone else said his skin seemed to drain of color in stages, like the tide going out. Helen Marsh, sitting in the back row, said only that he looked like a man who had opened a door he was certain led outside and found instead that there was no floor on the other side. Pause. Absolute silence, then the faintest music, low and inevitable. "Your Honor," Park began. "Mr. Park? Yes, sit down for a moment." He sat down. Judge Wren looked at the room with the calm authority of someone who has presided over many moments and understands that what makes them consequential is not volume, but precision. "The document before the court," she said, "is the last will and testament of Thomas Whitmore, executed and witnessed on the 14th of November of last year and verified by the estate attorney of record. The will contains a conditional inheritance clause, specifically that the full Whitmore estate, including the controlling interest in Whitmore Development Holdings, passes to Eleanor Whitmore Hale upon the finalization of any legal dissolution of her current marriage, under the specific condition that the divorce proceedings reveal conduct consistent with the criteria outlined in Section 7, Paragraph 3 of the document. She paused. I have reviewed Section 7, Paragraph 3. I am satisfied that the conduct described therein is consistent with the proceedings before this court today, specifically including the filing of a paternity challenge without supporting evidence for the purpose of procedural delay and public reputational harm. Another pause. Mr. Park, your client's legal team filed that challenge 47 minutes ago. It will be dismissed. Additionally, I am directing that the prenuptial agreement in question be reviewed under the oversight clause noted by Counselor Osei, given the representation circumstances she has documented. She set her pen down. We will take a 20-minute recess. She stood. Everyone stood. And as Judge Wren walked toward her chambers, Eleanor Whitmore Hale sat at her table, her hands folded in her lap, one layered carefully over the other, in exactly the same position as when she had entered this room. She did not look at Marcus. She did not look at David Park. She looked at Sandra Osei, who met her eyes with the composed, steady expression of a woman who has done her work exactly as she intended it. Eleanor took a slow breath. In the gallery, Helen Marsh pressed her lips together and looked at the ceiling briefly in the way people do when they are trying not to cry in a public place. At the plaintiff's table, Marcus Hale sat very still. His attorney was leaning toward his ear, speaking in rapid, low tones. Marcus was not listening. He was staring at the bench where the manila envelope still rested, its contents already entered into the record, already part of a proceeding that was no longer shaped the way he had built it. He looked, for the first time in as long as Eleanor could remember, like someone who did not know what came next. Pause. Music rises slightly, then gentles into something warmer. During the recess, Eleanor walked to the corridor outside the courtroom. Sandra came with her. Gerald fell into step on her other side. Eleanor stood at the tall window at the end of the hallway and looked out at the city below, at the particular orderly busyness of a Thursday morning, people moving with the focused purpose of those who have somewhere to be and something to do. She felt the baby move again, not a small shift this time, a proper, deliberate kick, the kind that announces itself. She put her hand on her belly. She knows, Sandra said quietly. Eleanor smiled, a real one, small and private, turned toward the window so it was for no one but herself and the city and the memory of her father's steady hands. He prepared all of this. He sat in that library and he read the documents and he called Gerald and he put all of this in place while he was sick, while he was... Her voice stopped. Gerald spoke gently. He told me once, he said, Gerald, I want her to be safe when I'm no longer here to say something about it. That was his exact language. He wanted you to be safe. Eleanor nodded once. Then she looked at the two people beside her, her attorney, her father's attorney, two people who had carried something heavy on her behalf, and said simply, "Thank you." Then she turned around and walked back to the courtroom. The hearing resumed. What followed in the next 90 minutes was not dramatic in the courtroom television sense. There was no shouting, no sudden revelation pulled from a briefcase at the last moment, no moment where someone broke down or lost composure. What happened was more the legal equivalent of a careful, inevitable dismantling, the kind that occurs when one side of a proceeding has its structural assumptions removed and must rebuild its position from scratch in real time. Marcus Park requested a continuance. Judge Wren denied it. The prenuptial agreement's enforceability was formally placed under judicial review. The asset claims regarding Hale Construction's valuation were referred for independent financial audit, a request Sandra had anticipated and prepared for. The paternity challenge was dismissed entirely, with a notation in the record that it had been filed without supporting evidence and that its timing and framing suggested improper procedural intent. That notation would matter later. The settlement framework that Marcus's team had presented, the one that Sandra had described as insufficient, was not accepted. A counter-framework was submitted. It would take additional proceedings to finalize, but the architecture of those proceedings had fundamentally shifted. Marcus Hale left the courthouse that afternoon without speaking to Eleanor. He did not look at her as he passed. She did not watch him go. Pause. Long, quiet, significant. In the weeks and months that followed, the full picture came together in the gradual way that true pictures always do. The financial transactions that Helen Marsh had described, the ones that Thomas Whitmore had learned of from sources that would have made Marcus uncomfortable had he known they existed, became part of the independent audit. What they revealed was not criminal in the most dramatic sense, but it was significant. Marcus's legal team had been racing to finalize the divorce not only because of the Whitmore estate, but because certain arrangements within Hale Construction's books, arrangements that Eleanor's own contributions had unwittingly provided cover for, were better resolved under the terms of a marital dissolution than under the more uncomfortable terms of a regulatory inquiry. Sandra and Gerald worked together with an efficiency that Eleanor found quietly moving. Two careful people doing meticulous work on her behalf, in the tradition of her father's own meticulousness. The divorce was finalized in June. On the morning it was made official, Eleanor was sitting in the garden of the Whitmore family property, her property now, by legal instrument and by every other measure, in the particular warmth of an early summer morning, with her bare feet in the grass her father had planted, and her daughter, 6 weeks old and already exhibiting what the pediatrician called a highly opinionated disposition, asleep against her chest, in the small, warm, perfect weight of brand-new personhood. Her name was Clara. Clara Whitmore Hale, and Eleanor was already thinking about the paperwork to remove the second part of that name when the time was right, when Clara was old enough to understand. But that was a decision for later. For now, Clara was simply Clara, asleep in the garden, one small fist curled beneath her chin, breathing with the complete unguarded trust of someone who has never yet had a reason to do otherwise. Eleanor had been asked by several people in the months of the proceedings, Sandra, Helen, a therapist she had begun seeing in the spring, some version of the same question, whether she was angry, whether she wanted Marcus to suffer a consequence proportional to what he had done, whether the outcome, the legal resolution, the inheritance, the reversal, had given her what she needed. She had thought about this question carefully, the way she thought about everything carefully. What she had decided was that there were two kinds of justice. There is the justice of punishment, which requires someone else's pain to feel complete, and there is the justice of restoration, which asks only that what was taken be returned, and that the person who was diminished be given back the space to stand at their full height again. She had wanted the second kind, and she had it. Not because Marcus had been brought low, though she would not pretend entirely that watching the certainty leave his face in that courtroom had not given her something she needed, but because she was here in this garden, with her father's property beneath her feet and her daughter's breath against her collarbone, and her own full, uncompromised self intact inside her chest. She had not lost herself. That was the thing she had feared most in those months of rain and parking lots and late-night phone calls and the specific loneliness of being wronged in a way that no one fully sees. She had feared that she would come out of it diminished, smaller, harder, colder, the bright parts of her worn down by the friction of what Marcus had done. She had not. She was entirely herself, perhaps more entirely herself than she had been in years. Sandra called that afternoon. "Congratulations, Eleanor." "Thank you, Sandra, for everything." A pause. Then Sandra said, Your father would be proud of you." Eleanor looked out at the garden, at the rose beds she and Thomas had planted together 20 years ago, at the oak tree by the back wall that had been there longer than either of them, at the late morning light coming through the leaves in the moving, dappled way that light in gardens moves when the world is simply itself. "I know," she said. "I really do know that." Pause. And here is what Eleanor Whitmore knew in the deepest part of herself on that June morning, with the summer beginning and her daughter breathing quietly against her, and her father's garden around her, and her whole life, in some fundamental sense, ahead of her. She knew that the most dangerous thing a person can do to someone they have underestimated is simply to survive them, not to destroy them in return, not to perform a victory, but to survive completely, thoroughly, with your integrity uncompromised and your spirit unbroken, and to build on the ground they thought they had taken from you, something so enduring and so entirely your own that their absence becomes not a wound, but a foundation. Thomas Whitmore had known this. He had built it into the structure of a legal document, with the same quiet precision with which he had built everything in his life, one careful, patient element at a time. And Eleanor had received it, not as a gift from a father to a daughter, though it was that too, but as a lesson, the last and most complete one, about the nature of quiet power and what it takes to hold it. Clara stirred on her chest. Eleanor adjusted her hold, that instinctive, effortless adjustment that new mothers make without thinking, the one that says, "I have you, I see you, I am not going anywhere," and looked down at the small, serious face of her daughter in the morning light. "Your grandfather," she said quietly, "was the most patient person I have ever known." Clara's eyes, dark, watchful, already taking in the quality of light and the warmth on her face and the sound of her mother's voice, moved slowly toward Eleanor's face. "You're wanted to be safe," she said, "both of us." She held her daughter a little closer. The garden was warm and full of sound, birds and the distant movement of leaves, and the particular alive quiet of a morning in June that has no agenda except to be itself. Eleanor Whitmore held her daughter, sat in her father's garden, and breathed. She did not need to do anything else right now. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. Marcus Hale went on to face the independent financial audit that the divorce proceedings had triggered. The process was lengthy and costly, and what it revealed about the internal architecture of Hale Construction required adjustments that the company's reputation did not easily absorb. He did not marry Vivian. He did eventually pursue a DNA test, voluntarily through his attorneys, and received the result that Eleanor had always known was coming, and that had never for a single moment been in any genuine doubt. He had a daughter. He was offered, through Sandra's office, a carefully structured visitation agreement that reflected the child's best interests and Eleanor's absolute commitment to placing Clara's well-being above any other consideration, above anger, above the memory of the courtroom, above the cold February morning when she had sat alone in a hospital parking lot and made the decision to stop being small. He accepted the agreement. He never apologized. Eleanor did not wait for it, because she had understood, somewhere in the months between the parking lot and the garden, that an apology from a person who has not genuinely changed is only a continuation of the same story by different means, and Eleanor Whitmore was no longer interested in continuing that story. She had a new one. It started in a garden with a daughter named Clara, on a morning in June, with her father's roses in bloom, and the whole unwritten future, patient and waiting, spread out ahead of her like good soil. Some people build their power loudly, with titles and signatures and the performance of authority. Thomas Whitmore had understood and had taught his daughter by example that the most durable kind of power is built quietly, in the structure of a document, in the careful watching of a room. in the long, faithful belief that patience is not passivity, it is preparation. Eleanor Whitmore did not need Marcus Hale to understand what she had built. She simply needed to stand in it. And she did. If this story moved you, if you have ever felt the particular invisibility of being competent and underestimated at the same time, then this one was for you. Leave a comment below. We read every one. And if you haven't already, subscribe. There are more stories coming. Like this one. Real ones.